Have you ever hit a point in your life where you look in the mirror and don't even recognize the man staring back at you? Not because you've grown, but because life broke something in you. The divorce, the failures, the silence in your home after dropping off the kids. And the question becomes, who am I now that I'm no longer who I used to be? This episode is for the man who feels like he's lost himself, the man trying to rise but who still feels like he's bleeding inside. Now listen, according to a study published by the Journal of Men's Health, nearly 60% of divorced men report depression, anxiety, and identity crisis within just 2 years of the split. But here's what the data can tell you. That rock bottom can be the place you finally meet your true self. And sometimes the fall is what you really need to wake up. Today we're talking about what it means to rebuild. Not just your life, but your identity, your worth, your relationship with yourself. And I couldn't have asked for a better guest to have this conversation with. Amy Dawes is an incredible human being. She's a mom, a healer, a poet, an artist. She's a woman who completely rebuilt her life after postpartum depression, divorce, chronic pain, and years of living small. She's the creator of the True Color Body Painting process, an experience that helps people reconnect with who they truly are. And she's the host of the podcast Winning the Divine Lottery, a show that invites you to remember that you were never broken in the first place, only disconnected from the truth of your worth. Amy's story is powerful. It's vulnerable. It's going to speak to something deep in you. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been questioning your value, and if you're ready to finally come home to yourself, then lean in. This episode is for you. And just so you know, this is part 1 of our conversation with Amy. There's more to come, and trust me, you're going to want to hear everything. So without further ado, let's get to it. Before going deeper into the subject of our episode, I want to talk to you about my coaching program and why I created it. A few years ago, I found myself in a very dark place. I was working hard, but felt like I was spinning my wheels. I had no control over where my life was going. Everything around me was crumbling, and I was powerless to stop it. It's frustrating and scary when you've lost your sense of direction, especially in your 30s and 40s, when you feel like you should have had things figured out by now. That's why I created Rise. It's a coaching program for professionals who, like I did, felt disconnected from their purpose and passion. Through 4 simple steps, Rise helps you break free from doubts, reconnect with your true self, set clear goals, and take actions that move you forwards. I've been where you are, and I found a way through it. And I know you can too. So if this message resonates with you and you're ready to start your journey of rediscovery and purpose, I would love to help you take that next step. So feel free to connect with me through my website, www.yvestmukanya.com, and it spells YVESTMUKANYA.com, or on LinkedIn, it's just Yves Mukanya. Let's work together to help you create the life you know you deserve. Now, let's get back to our episode. Have you ever felt like you were stuck? Asking yourself, how do I find clarity and purpose when everything around me feels overwhelming? And I'm not even sure where I'm going. Well, you're not alone. Whether you're running a business, raising kids, or trying to keep up with the demands of life, we all reach a point where we lose our sense of direction. But here's the thing. If you're ready to rediscover your passion, find your way back again, and reconnect with what truly matters to you, you've come to the right place. I'm your host, Yves Mukanya, and you are listening to the Rising and Thriving podcast. Hi, Amy. Thank you for joining me for this discussion on resilience, mindset shift, and stepping into the fullness of who you are. I was really looking forward to our conversation because I think your story is one of, I believe, a deep transformation. But before we talk about how you rebuild your life, let's go back to where it all started, the moment when everything just fell apart. Okay.
That's a good question. Well, thank you for having me. Way to unroll the red carpet here. When everything fell apart. Oh my goodness. That's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. It was actually shortly after my son was born,
Mm-hmm.
but even before that, my pregnancy with him had some intense complications with it, physical complications,
Okay.
which was really took a toll on my mind as well
Mm-hmm.
and my emotions. But as a first time pregnant woman, I just pushed through. That's kind of what I knew how to do. And so after he was born, there was just I had an emergency C-section with him. I was already
Mm-hmm.
not well. I just wanted to get home and be with my baby and be a mom. And there was he almost died the night he was born, and a nurse came
He,
in and
he
saved
almost he
him.
almost died.
Yeah, he almost died. He actually, because he was born C-section, his
Mm-hmm.
lungs was filled with fluid, and because I was just like out of surgery, I was not able to move, and I could
Mm-hmm.
hear something going on, and like the nurse that came in was an angel. She knew exactly what to do and got the fluid out of his lungs, and he was fine. But there was
Mm.
lots of little moments like that where I truly knew that like there was something greater watching over us. And I just wanted to get home, like I said, as fast as I could. So I did whatever it took to get out of that hospital. And once I got home, it was like my health started declining even more.
Mm-hmm.
I had
Mm-hmm.
postpartum depression. Um, my marriage was not doing well, and it really accentuated after my son was born. I give so much credit to my son's dad. At the time, though, he had some really heavy addictions that I didn't know about, and that
Okay.
was actually triggered even more by the birth of our son. So it actually sort of had the opposite effect of him, where he wanted to avoid, not be around, and that's kind of how he dealt with it. So I felt very alone the first year
Mm.
of my son's life, and
Yeah.
I ended up with pre-cervical cancer, so that's the stage before you actually have cancer.
Okay.
I had to have a couple of processes to take care of that. I was also a personal trainer before my son was born, and just physically, mentally, and emotionally, like I knew that I could not return back to that, or at least that's the decision I made with everything that was going on in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was the beginning, and then a miracle occurred, and
Okay.
I came
Miracle.
across yeah, I came across something called Body Talk, which is conscious-based energy medicine. This was just after my
Okay.
son was a year old. And without even knowing a whole lot about it, I actually signed up for the first course, which is like a
Mm-hmm.
level 1 and a level 2. And I still remember my first day going into this course, not knowing what I was really getting myself into. And I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting in a chair just like this in extreme pain because I had inflammation in my knee that
Yeah.
lasted over a year. And prior to that, 16 years, I had chronic issues with it. And so just sitting was so painful for me. And that course was a span of 4 days. And I walked out of there with all the inflammation in my knee gone, and
Mm-hmm.
something had transformed from within me. And I was hooked from that moment
Okay.
on.
Before going to the course,
Yeah.
right? Did you see a way forward, or did you feel like, did it feel like the pain would just last forever?
Yeah, well, something that I had been used to, like when you have chronic pain for 16 years, that happens off and on, it's something that became my identity. Like I didn't know any other way. And this was a knee injury that happened in basketball when I was 16. And I remember going to physio once or twice, and it never got better, and there was nothing in me that went, "Well, why don't we try something else?" And my parents never did that either, so whatever it was, I never saw another way, I just learned to live with it, if that makes sense. And so,
Okay.
no, I didn't see a way out until literally, like, this miracle occurred, and I realized that I had this spontaneous healing, which I'd never experienced before. And it was
Mm.
all based on, some sexual trauma actually that I had when I
Okay.
was a little girl.
Okay. Wow. Oh, I mean, the reason why I ask is because I think we had a conversation before, and you know that I went through a divorce,
Mhm.
and I think when I was in my darkest time, I felt like I was constantly in darkness, and
Mhm.
I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And also, I had to come to terms with the fact that my marriage was over.
Mhm.
You know, because whether we like it or not, losing a relationship often feel like we are losing a part of ourselves. But for you though, you also mentioned that you went through a divorce. Okay,
Yeah.
after your divorce, did you ever question your own worth?
Mm. I've questioned my own worth for almost my whole entire life, and I still catch myself doing that from time to time. It's a daily
Even now?
practice to bring myself back to that. I think for me, and I know I can probably speak for a lot of people, or they can relate at least to my story,
Mm-hmm.
is like I was never taught self worth. I was never taught like how to nurture oneself and self love. In fact, when I was in high school, and I'll get back to the divorce part in a second, but when I was in high
Mm-hmm.
school, um, I started gaining a lot of weight in high school. And by the time I
Mm,
graduated, I was like 45 to 50 pounds overweight. And
mm.
I thought without beauty and without being a certain size, that there was nothing else. Like, I identified it with my body, and if I didn't have that, then I was unworthy. And it took
Is that why you became a physical trainer?
Probably. It's such a ironic thing, right? But I always
Mm-hmm.
had a fascination about health and the body and everything. Yeah, I just loved it. And yeah, I ended up going down that path of being a personal trainer and getting really healthy and getting really fit. And then I've had these fluctuations with health throughout my life. But leading up to my divorce, I'll have to say this because my experience was a little bit different. Like, my
Okay.
marriage was falling apart, but I didn't even have time to focus on that because I started my healing journey with body talk. And when it's conscious based healing, what really is happening is I'm becoming aware of all my subconscious beliefs, habits, patterns, and my whole world just flipped from the inside out. And my
Mm,
perspectives were changing. And even everything that I was going through in my marriage, like,
mm-hmm.
I was becoming more liberated in the process, while he was going in another direction with addictions. The thing is, I didn't even know. Like, he hid these addictions from me so well, and I was so involved in just my personal healing journey that when he came out with them, it
Mm-hmm.
made sense, but at the same time, I was in shock because I knew nothing about cocaine and things like that, and it was just, yeah, it was crazy. So,
Um,
me leaving that marriage, well, it was a mutual decision by the time it happened.
mm-hmm.
Um, in the beginning, I would say it boosted my self-worth
Mm,
because I was making a decision for me and I knew it was right
yeah.
for the first time in my life. Um,
Uh,
I would say maybe 5 years later is when the self-worth stuff started to come back up because I was still single and he had moved on and all my friends had
mm,
moved on and I had been doing all this inner work in my life and I
mm,
still couldn't, in my perspective, find the man I was supposed to be with. So, yeah, I hope that answers your
mm.
question about self-worth. It's something I'm
Yeah.
constantly working on.
Okay. So, how did you find your way back to yourself then?
Yeah, well, again, body talk was a big proponent in that.
Mm-hmm.
It really changed the way I thought, how I use my mind, understanding that our belief systems, our emotions, the way we think, the way we feel, create
Mm-hmm.
certain actions. Like, it really did change my life. And it opened up so much in me that I didn't know existed within me. Like, I became an artist, I became an author. Like, these things that I just didn't know were laying dormant within inside of me, and then I had so much passion for sharing this with other people. So I think that was part of it, just being able to help other people what I had been through, right? And I think
Mm,
that, like, I always come back to that. So rebuilding myself really was an inner job. And I
okay.
truly feel, and I know you agree with that, like, it really is an inside job.
It's an
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So, if you don't mind me asking, how long were you guys married? Because um, I know addictions are, I think, sometimes cause shame to the person who is addicted,
Mhm.
but to be able to hide it to the point where you're not seeing it, it takes a lot of effort and work on the other part on the part of your of the other person. So, how long were you married, and what do you think made you not see the problem that was right in front of you?
Yeah, we were together 10 years, and actually hiding cocaine is actually very easy. I've
Really?
talked to more people that have been addicted to cocaine, and it's actually
Mm-hmm.
something very easy to hide because a lot of people can act very normal. I knew something was off. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
it was that. Like, I knew he wasn't coming home. We were sleeping in separate beds. Like, I knew the things, the actions that were happening. But for me to guess that that's what it was, I had no
Mm.
idea. And we tried addressing it so many times. And it was actually when he finally came out with that. Um, it felt like a breath of fresh air because I grew up, not myself, but my family members had a lot of addictions and went to the recovery side of it. So I know the 12-step program really well. Like I grew up with my dad going to AA meetings.
Mhm.
So when he came out, I was more than willing to support him. My family was too. But by the time it had gotten to that point, there
Mhm.
was just so much toxicity that happened,
Between
and
you and him?
between him and I, yeah, there was
Okay.
just so much toxicity that when he started to go into recovery and then relapsed a couple times, it got to the point where we both knew it wasn't gonna work, and
Mm.
I don't regret that decision because it's actually the catalyst for him being able to fully get into recovery, and he's a great dad today, and he's been in recovery for I don't even know how many years, so,
Mm.
yeah.
So, how did you feel when you guys tried? I believe that you wanted your marriage to work out. So, how did you feel when you realized that it wasn't going to work?
Um, it's funny that you asked that question because it was a few years before
Mhm.
that little things started showing up in my life. I'm not kidding. Like my parents bought my son a pass to what's called like the leisure center here. They have a gym and a pool and everything. And they sent it to me and put my maiden name on there. And that was like a happy accident. And I saw
Mm.
that and I got so triggered. I was like, how can they put my maiden name on here when they know my married name? But that there was little things that started to happen like that. And in my gut, I knew that eventually this is the decision that we were going to make, but it took a couple years to really finally follow through with that. It was tough. It's tough to let go of a dream and a life that you've built with somebody, especially when you love them and especially when you share a child, right? And so
Yep.
and I wanted it to work. I would have done anything for it to work. And at the same
Mm.
time, how much are you going to compromise, I guess, your
Mm.
values and your worth? And that goes on both sides, right? It was him
Yeah.
too. So, yeah, it's just the way it ended up working out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. The reason I'm also asking because when I was trying to do some research on the subject, especially for this episode, I came across a study that showed that divorce triggers identity crisis
Mm,
and also lead to self doubt and depression. And I was just wondering. I know that you said that when your marriage happened, you were not okay with it, but you were already on your path to change or on your path to grow.
mhm.
But did you experience any sort of identity crisis, self doubt, and depression as well?
I really didn't. I was already so deep in my transformation. I always say that body talk coming into my life was my saving grace. It really was the foundation. that I had to work through the divorce changes. I actually felt like I came more into my sovereignty, more into knowing who I was throughout that whole process because of how I was already so grounded in my transformation prior to that. No, and I've been through identity crises, and my divorce was not one of them.
Okay. All right. So did you feel at all disconnected from your ex-husband at some point?
Disconnected 100%. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, the first couple of years were tough. We had to, we had to take our time to set certain boundaries for us, right? So that we could
Mm-hmm.
heal and we could do what we needed to do for ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
then eventually come back together as conscious co-parents. 100%, and that looked different for me, and that looked different for him. He was the first year or 2, he was very focused on his recovery, and I was just focused on being a single mom.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did that affect your son?
Yeah, wow. My son is so amazing, and I could see, especially when he was young, because he's a very sensitive being. He's very attuned to his environment. Some people would call that empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
I also know through studies in science that our children are actually more connected to us than we even consciously know. Um, for an example, I'll share this story with you.
Mm-hmm.
My son, at one point, before we separated, started having night terrors. He would wake up and he would be like almost talking in tongues and sweating and was scared. And he would
Mm.
never remember him having these experiences the next day. And so, because I was heavily involved in body talk, I had some sessions done on him and it still didn't change. Um, and then one day I was learning Bert Cummings, or not Burton Cummings. Sorry, I'm gonna get his name incorrect right now. I can't. Burt Goldman. He he
Okay.
developed quantum jumping. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No, that's new to me.
Yeah, it's again working with energetics. So it might be
Mm-hmm.
new for people who are listening, but part of his theory is all possibilities exist in the quantum. So you could
Mm.
actually, sort of quantum jump into a different timeline where whatever problem you're currently working with, you
Mm-hmm.
could jump into the solution of where it's already been solved. And so I was
Mm.
kind of like, what do I have to lose? I could try
Mm.
this, right? And I did. And what ended up coming up was I got two messages to kind of look. Um, for 2 things. One was this car that I was currently driving, my ex-husband started driving it because he bought me a new vehicle, and all
Mm-hmm.
I saw in this vision was him putting something under the floor of the seat of the car. Anyways, sorry about that.
No
Um,
worry.
when he came out with his addiction, I asked him, I'm like, "Where did you hide the drugs?" Because like, I did not know. And he
Mm.
said he hid them under the seat of the floor of the car that he was driving, and I was
Wow.
literally given that vision when I did that quantum jumping. But the specific thing, and that's really important to mention here, is the minute my ex came out with his drug addiction, my
Mm-hmm.
son's night terrors stopped, and every time he relapsed, his night terrors started again, and I always knew
Wow.
because of that.
Oh, so they are connected, sort of connected spiritually, if I would say that.
Yeah, and energetically.
Okay.
Yeah, so in tune, like, on a subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
So, my son, I think, processed fairly well, but he did go through stages where he acted out a little bit in school when he was younger, um, and missing his dad a lot because his dad wasn't in his life the way he was. He wasn't in the house, right,
Yeah.
anymore, so I noticed, especially being the primary caregiver, that he was very protective of me, which is normal. He's a male, and that's actually a beautiful thing for him to
Mm-hmm.
have, to wanna protect. the female in the house, so, yeah, but he's turned out to just be an incredible young man with such an open mind, and we've made a point to be very, very open and honest, and a safe place for him to come to us with anything.
Okay. So I know co-parenting can be very challenging,
Mhm.
right? So what did you do to help your ex-husband maintain a relationship with his son?
Well, for a while there, I tried a lot of things that
Mm-hmm.
didn't work. And
Mm,
I love that you asked me this question because I had such a deep desire to be conscious co parents because of the transformation that I was going through in my life to the point where I'll share this manifestation story with you, okay? So I
mm-hmm.
went to the Dolby Theater to see Kyle Cease. He used to be an actor and a comedian, and he turned transformation, and he just brings a lot of humor into it. And the way I got there was really, really magical. But I'll share this story with you of the very last day. I was actually having some conflict with my ex back home. And the morning of the last day, I thought to myself in my meditation that morning, this is really interesting that this is coming up. I bet you I'll get my answer in this event that I was a part of. And so I showed up on the second day and I was sitting in the very front row of the Dolby Theater. And Kyle walked out on stage right in front of me and he made eye contact with me. And in that moment, I knew something was going to happen, but I didn't know what. And he talked for maybe 20 minutes, and then he asked one specific question from the day before, and my hand went up, and he pointed to me, and he started talking with me from the stage. And it led me to me actually going up on stage. So there I was on the Dolby Theater stage in front of 3,000 people, and my whole breakthrough was around how I desired so badly for to have this conscious co-parenting relationship that I've been trying to have for like 2 years and it wasn't working. Nothing I was doing was working. And my breakthrough was that I had to completely let go of that. Like I had to completely let go of that and just have it be enough that I get to be the conscious parent instead of trying to control him. Because what it
Yeah.
was doing actually was pushing him away even more. And so I had to surrender and let go completely and let him be him and him own his decisions. And I did that. And slowly, just over time, he started to come into it a little bit more.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, when you were talking, I got this image. I think that's also an analogy that I used to have in mind. So I was going through my divorce and the co-parenting and everything, and I had a picture in mind, right? Like picture, okay, this is how it's supposed to go. This is how it's supposed to be, and then I was trying to fit everything according to me in
Mhm.
that canvas in that picture. But in reality, people make their own choices.
Yep.
I can't force somebody to fit into the picture that I have. That's my own design. But that doesn't mean that the other person has the same design as myself.
Exactly.
All right. So that when I understood that and I think the same as you, it allowed me to kind of move away,
Mhm.
right? Let things go and understand that if anything, if my canvas or my pic, I don't have the picture perfect,
Yeah.
it's still okay
Mhm.
because that's my views. That's my perspective. Somebody else has their own perspective and they're going to act and behave and respond in the way that they want because that's their perspective,
Yes.
you know? And that kind of helped me move away from that picture perfect example or the thing that I
Mhm.
had in mind and trying to impose it on somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that yeah. So to me, that's when you were talking. That I went back to that time, and that's the picture that came to mind when you were saying that.
Yeah. I think as parents in general that we just really want what's best for our kids. So it
Mm-hmm.
comes from a really loving, intentional place. But you're right. Like we can't control other people. People have to
Mm-hmm.
own their decisions and um live out the effects of those decisions, and it just is what it is. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
The reason I wanted to start our conversation at that point, it was because hitting rock bottom, um for everybody, hitting rock bottom is something that we all fear, you know? And but what I feel like we don't understand is that it's not the hardest part.
No.
The hardest part is figuring out how to climb back up.
Mm.
So in your case, once you realize that you wanted to rebuild, what what did the healing process actually look like? I know you talked about the body, what was that,
Body talk.
body talk,
Mhm.
okay? So what other thing did you use outside of that? Or how did that truly help you? Like, ex- can you give me a concrete example of how it helped you mentally, physically, and emotionally?
Again, it comes back to that word liberation. Yeah, I'll talk about body talk a little
Mm,
bit more, and then there were so many other things too. But when you when you live your life a certain way, you have a view of the world and you have a view of
mm-hmm,
yourself. Okay. My view of the world prior to this was like I don't have any control over
mm,
consciously creating my life. It's almost like
mm,
life happens automatically and there's nothing I can do about it. And my view of myself was very small. It was very,
mm,
I had a lot of insecurities. I had a lot of needing outside validation to
mm-hmm,
prove that I'm enough. And so through this process of body talk, and really, like, looking at all of that and looking at all your belief systems, I started to understand significantly, um, that those belief systems are built on lies. Like, they're built on
mm,
conditioning from my parents, and it's not their fault by any means. They did the best that they knew how to do with what they had, right?
mm-hmm,
But I started becoming so aware of my unconscious programs and belief systems, and those are typically the ones that hold you back. Those are typically
mm,
the ones that keep you in fear and don't keep you moving forward and have you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again and you never learn the lesson, right? So
yeah,
I
yeah,
chose the hard way prior to this because of that, because I didn't know any differently. And then
got
I
it.
saw, wow, wait a second. Life is actually always happening for me, and it's happening for me because even if it's challenging, even if
Mm-hmm,
there's adversity that shows up, it's an opportunity for me to grow, for me to learn something new about myself, and then to
yeah,
turn that into wisdom, right? Because when we
yeah,
extract the lessons, it turns into wisdom, which I believe makes us more true. And the truth is, we're already whole. We are already worthy. We're not here to prove that to anybody. We're here
mm,
to uncover it and remember it. So that was
yeah,
really significant in my life. And another part is like meditation. Meditation for me has been and it's become a non-negotiable because
mm,
meditation, when I sit and I close my eyes, and I do all kinds of different meditations, but the one that has changed my life the most is just sitting with no distractions, no music, no guided meditation, and just with my thoughts. Because
mm,
once you can do that, you become very aware of all the noise and all the internal chatter that happens. And it's so beautiful to understand how easy your thoughts can pull you in one direction. Like the mind can just take you there. But the more you do this and become present, you bring yourself back to the present moment, you understand that the mind can just do what it needs to do. Thoughts can come and go, and you don't have to get pulled with them. You can just be
yeah,
the observer. And that in itself creates so much more peace inside of me. It gives me a sense of empowerment, and it also is like a forgiving and compassionate way of being able to view myself because we all have this internal chatter. Like our minds are designed to constantly be going, but that's not truly who we are.
wow, you say a lot. Like you touched up on a lot of things that I also wanted to ask you questions about because, as I say, for me, I know that healing. A lot of people think that healing is just a straight line, and then I'm going here, and then I'll be healed at that point.
Mm,
You know, healing isn't always a straight path. You know, sometimes you feel like you're taking two steps forward and one step or three step back.
yeah.
You know, so in your journey of healing, can you share a moment when you felt like you were slipping backward,
Mm,
and how did you pull yourself out of it?
yeah. I'll share during COVID actually was a really dark night of the soul experience for me.
Mm,
There were some things that had happened in my business that I viewed as um I carried a lot of shame around. So I was very aware that I had this pattern within me that I learned from a child that if I judged something like a decision that I made that I
mhm.
believed could have been a better decision, it's almost like I would put myself in a shame prison.
A
And
shame
a
prison.
shame prison. I would
Huh.
lock myself in shame, literally. And because we were isolated and I was home with my son and I work from home, so I was already it was almost like isolation times 100. That's what it felt like for me. So that was happening and I it's so interesting, but I at the beginning didn't know how to get myself out of the shame. I avoided it. I tried to do everything to avoid it. I did reach out for help for, um, some people that I did trust, and it's not like I didn't ask for help, but
Mhm.
it got stronger and stronger and stronger until it became almost debilitating. Like, I did experience depression, I experienced anxiety, and I still remember this day. It was my
Mm.
birthday, and my parents were visiting, and I had an anxiety attack in my living room, sitting right in front of them, and nobody knew. And I didn't even feel safe enough in my nervous system to say something to my own parents. And
Wow.
after they went to bed, my son was still there, and I just broke down crying. Like, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I broke down crying, and something in me shifted in that moment, and I
Mhm.
knew that I didn't wanna live like this anymore and that I had to do something. So what I actually did, this has been another tool in my life. I'm so grateful that I grew
Mhm.
up with a dad that went to AA because I went to Alateen and I went to Al Anon. Al Anon is the 12-step program for people who have been affected by people who have addictions. And
Okay.
it's all I had at the time. And I really think God favors us when we use what we have. Like, we think that we don't have the resources, but we always
Mm.
have the resources. And all I wanted to do was surround myself with people who were willing to change, who were
Mm.
going through something so that I didn't feel alone. And it was literally weekly meetings that started this path of pulling myself out of that. And then that led to me being open to really looking at what my shame was about again. And it
Mm.
led to me back doing into actually, I was still doing meditation, but I was doing it more intently,
Wonderful.
going for walks outside, rediscovering what had happened in my business and that didn't mean it was over and just all the
Mm.
internal judgment that I was carrying around myself. Like, it took me a little over a year to really bring myself out of that and
Mhm.
then realize that I was creating something brand new. This
Mm.
was I think anytime we go through a transition or a transformation, the part of us that feels like it's dying is actually the part of us that is our ego. It's not our truth. It's not who we really were. And
Mm.
when it gets really intense like that, it's because it actually wants to be brought into the light of consciousness to be
Mhm.
loved and
Mm.
seen and heard and accepted. And again, like, this was just a pattern from when I was a little girl,
Wow.
just playing out in my adult life.
Wow. That's very powerful right there. Yeah. And I know you talked a lot about mindset and daily practice, and I know you mentioned that you were doing a lot of meditation, right? But what was the most significant mindset shift that helped you stay committed to your healing?
In that moment,
Mm-hmm.
realizing that no one was coming to save me. I had to
Wow.
do it. I had to choose that. I had to choose living my life. That was really the mindset shift for me. That was something that actually used to really bother me when people would say, "No one's coming to save you." It just triggered me. But the
Mm,
moment I realized that nobody was, because I was literally sitting in front of my parents who loved me and adored me, um, and they couldn't save me.
mm,
Only I could
wow.
make that choice for myself. So that really was the mindset shift, was I just need to choose me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Wow. I mean, when talking about mindset, I believe it's Dr. Bruce Lipton, if I'm not
I love
mistaken.
him.
Oh yeah.
I have his books, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think he said that our subconscious belief shapes about 95% of our daily decisions.
Yes.
So, how did you start rewiring your subconscious mind to align with your transformation?
Mm. Again, I have to give credit to Body Talk. Everybody's gonna be looking at Body Talk after this. Body Talk is fascinating. It is. It's fascinating. It's what it does. It really does. When you become conscious of the unconscious, you have what's
Mm,
called self-awareness. And with self-awareness, you now can make changes on a subconscious
mm,
level, right? By the time we're 7 or 8 years old, we actually have all of our 95%, just like Bruce Lipton says, 95% of our belief systems are rooted in our subconscious mind, which is actually our body. And if we don't ever go within to learn, we'll never know. We'll never know. We can't make conscious changes without getting to the root of the cause, which is our subconscious mind. Now, though, Dr. Joe Dispenza is probably my favorite human walking on this earth. He takes this to another level, and that's just in my opinion. He is pure love. Being in his presence, that's all I feel. And he knows the science. He can actually very easily share the science behind what we do when we're in his sessions with the meditation to show people, because he knows that science is like the bridge between spirituality and
mm-hmm.
transformation.
Yep.
That's an easy way to show people what we're doing. So his meditations really do teach you how to get really quiet and go beyond the personality. So he talks about, in order to really change, we have to change our personal reality, which is our personality. So, our personality is always based on the known. And that's everything that we've been taught since we were inside our mother's wombs, right? And then the experiences that we've had because of that. We have these belief systems which create an emotional addiction, he talks about. So, normally we get addicted to actually a life that we don't even like. And the way to change that and rewire our brains and create these new neural pathways is to get beyond the old self. He
Mm,
has a book called
yep.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. So go beyond the old personality, which is actually just the ego anyway, and going into what he calls the quantum field, which is at a cellular level. If you look inside of us, right? We have
Mm,
atoms and then we have electrons. And inside
yes.
electrons is 99.999% just empty space. And that empty space has information, which is made up of frequency, sound, and vibration. So that's truly what we are. We're frequency, sound, and vibration. We are energy. And so to really change on a subconscious level, it's about accessing that
Mm.
quantum field where we become no one, no thing, in no time. And I've had some magical, mystical experiences since starting Dr. Joe's work.
Wow. You know what? Listening to you, I felt like I was listening to Dr. Joe Dispenza right now.
Yeah, he does a way better job than me, but this is what I've learned from working with him, so
Yeah. Wow, that was pretty good. Really pretty good because I follow some of his work as well.
Mhm,
And they have helped me kind of understand a few things, especially when I was going through a difficult time on on term of mindset, on personal realities and things like that, and how to rewire the brain,
mhm.
and the meditation that he also had. So it was definitely helpful for me, you
Beautiful.
know. And I know that when we piggyback on that, as you know, once we start to heal, we also start to change,
Mhm.
and I believe that we come to the realization that our old ways of thinking no longer fit our current circumstances, and I think we begin to step into a new version of ourselves.
Yeah.
So but for you though, what was that transformation like for you?
Hmm. Which part? I've changed so many times. I really have. You know what you're reminding me of though when you asked me that question is
Mhm.
just over a year ago when my dad passed away,
Mhm.
his transition. Um, I really feel like I stepped into the leading lady of my life. I was actually
Mm.
teaching a course in my business with the intention of stepping into becoming the leading lady in our lives. And that was life's way of initiating me. I really
Mm.
truly feel no matter what we sign up for, that life always
Yes.
initiates us. And I can't tell you how the relationship with my dad was probably the most challenging one I had. And when I was going through all my healing process, I worked through a lot of that to the point
Mm.
where I had a way better relationship with him, but it still wasn't perfect.
Mhm.
And he had a tracheotomy in, so he couldn't speak. And it's so ironic because when I was a teenager, even in my early 20s, his voice was inside of my head so much that all I wanted to do was get it out. I wanted to remove it. And there became a time in my life where I never heard his voice anymore. And it was actually a very positive thing in my life.
Mm.
Bring us to his transition.
Yeah.
All I wanted to do was hear his voice, and he couldn't speak. And so I had moments of him where it was our eye language. You know, I
Mm.
believe that our eyes are the window to the soul. It was his touch. I remember having a vulnerable moment knowing that he was going to pass away, and I had anxiety through the roof, and I knew why. And I knew it's because my heart needed to break wide open. And
Mm.
sometimes to our ego, that's like a really scary thought.
Mm.
And I went just with my brother to see him, and I put my head on his chest and I let myself break down. And my dad caressed my head, and my brother caressed my back. And in that moment, I was being so held and so supported by two men. It was just such a beautiful experience. And I was so present throughout the whole entire process. And I think that's what I became. That was my transition. I stepped into
Mm.
becoming the leading lady of my life because of how present I was. I was
Okay.
nowhere else but there through the whole entire process, holding his hand while he passed away. And that experience shaped me and changed me and will stay with me for the rest of my life. Because
Mm.
if I can bring that as best as I can, and I forget sometimes,
Mhm.
into everything that I'm being and doing in my life, there is so much beauty. I'm going to coin Dr. Joe Dispenza anymore, but he's right. There's so much beauty and generosity in the present moment. And most of
Mm.
us spend so much time living in the past and then projecting that into the future that we're not in our hearts.
Wow. I can see that Dr. Josie Spencer really influenced a lot of the way you think,
Mhm.
and that experience, also that experience with your father, is very powerful because I lost my dad in 2022. My father was a very, I don't know if we talked about this in our conversation earlier, like he was a very powerful man,
Mhm.
right? Bigger than life, anything. And towards the end of his life, because he had diabetes and that affected um, his body, like his strength. And also towards the end of his life, he went through a few cardiac arrests and that affected his mind. So he had symptoms of dementia. There was a lot of things that he could no longer remember, you know? So when we brought him here, I was waiting for that bigger than life man person, but it wasn't there anymore. You know, he was very, very difficult for me to um, realize that I kind of have to step back a bit because this is a new reality.
Yeah.
You know, this that person that we had in our mind. Yeah, he existed. He influenced us. He changed the way we look at things or we approach things. He taught us. You know, but that person is no longer there. You know, my dad couldn't even walk, and that's the person who, when you walk, you feel like the earth is shaking, the house is moving, you know, like everything is trembling, but
Mhm.
he wasn't there, you know, and it was, as you said, like it was difficult, but I think the same as you, uh, I had my family, so we came into this situation together. Because my mom was helping him and we were supposed to also support her as well. So we came in and supported both my parents and my mom is both my parents. But as you also said, transformation, you're stepping into your leading lady. I think I had to step into the leader of my family
Mhm.
because I'm the firstborn, right? Dad was not there to make any decisions. Mom was emotionally, physically tired because she took care of him for over a year.
Yeah.
And taking care of someone who has dementia is not an easy fit. So it took me stepping up because everything that had to happen when there was a decision to be made, everybody turned to me. But I'm grateful to my dad though because he prepared me for this moment. You know, he prepared me for that time. So when, you know, he was there in front of me, not able to make any decisions, it was now easy for me to step into it. Well, but it's not an easy. It wasn't an easy transition. It wasn't an easy transformation.
Mm.
Well, because it also meant that I'm losing somebody important to me, and I think that was the hardest part of this whole process.
Mm.
You know, so I I think I went into a little deeper into
That's
something.
okay. It's okay.